Hello and welcome to the Brew Hoop podcast. Finally, after weeks of waiting, we have our whole band back together. It's, of course, Adam Paris, co-managing editor of brewhoop.com, leading this charade that we have here with Riley Feldman and Kyle Carr. We're all back together. Times are happy. The Bucks are winning, I think, doing well after this weird kind of last week. Riley and Kyle, how are you guys doing?
I'm mourning the loss of Pau Gasol, who early reports were not really sure what happened, but there's definitely a chance he twisted his ankle while sitting. So whatever happens, I think that's going to be a tough beat for the Bucks. So we're just going to have to see how it goes from there.
And I'm doing okay. I'm still sad about Dante's injury, but I did have a good birthday week. So thanks everyone that wished me a happy birthday. Other than the Bucks last Sunday, that was not nice.
What was the highlight of birthday week besides the Bucks loss?
Oh, that's a tough one. I went to La Taguara in Madison and Swagat, so a Venezuelan restaurant and a Indian restaurant. Both my parents and Emma's parents took me out to dinner both for those times, and the food is just fantastic. So getting 2 free dinners, always a plus.
What's sure? Oh, go ahead, Riley.
I was going to say, are you sure it wasn't watching Minnesota make it to the second round of the tournament and watching the Badgers get bounced in the first game, or was that just me?
That was just you.
Oh, yeah, okay. It was 100% just you. I was going to give you 1 minute at the end of the pod to shine, but you don't get it.
You've already thrown it away.
Yeah, I got it in at least. I got the lick in at least.
Yeah, they looked good yesterday.
How dare you, sir?
Well, hey.
Shout out to the Badgers being the only team to lose in round 1. Very impressive fashion.
Yeah, I was a huge Badger fan growing up. Always watched them with my dad and everything. And as I've grown much more accustomed to NBA basketball, it has grown increasingly more difficult to watch the Badgers play the sport of basketball.
It's just tough watching college basketball in general.
You telling me seeing Mr. Hep posted up underneath the basket time after time isn't doing it for you?
Look, Riley, his array of post moves could certainly translate to the next level. Okay, yeah. I really think he has some potential there. All right, have you seen how he stuffs the stat score? How he stuffs the box score? I mean, he passes out of the post. He can
only
dribble.
For Brad Davison to clank it off the rim for the 8th time.
Yeah, I really think this Badgers team could compete with the best of the best.
This is like one of those conversations. Like, would Alabama be able to beat like the lowliest NFL team? Like, would Wisconsin of this year be able to beat the I don't know who's the worst team, the Knicks of this year? Potentially.
Oh God. All right. Well, we don't need to talk about Wisconsin basketball anymore. Let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, who had an interesting week. I think Riley and I went pretty deep on that Sixers game last week. By far the most interesting game of this past week, especially considering Giannis sat out for 2 of the games against the Lakers and the Cavaliers last Tuesday and Wednesday night. Let's start, guys, just going over sort of the week that was, and let's start with that 115-101 victory over the Lakers. Middleton goes off for 30 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. Brook Lopez has 28 points in that one. Mirotic has 23. Of course, he gets injured. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But was there anything that stood out to you from that game, Riley? For me, it just kind of felt like it felt like sort of a taking care of business game. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope kept the Lakers in it almost single-handedly. But beyond that, it was nice to see Middleton get some shine.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the takeaway from the Lakers game and then just throughout the week in general was the fact that Middleton seems to be, in true Middleton fashion, rounding into form as we get closer to the playoffs here, which is super duper welcome. And that's even doubly welcome because in the past when Giannis would sit, I think Chris, I didn't really go back to look at what his stat line was for other games that Giannis sat in, but the fact that he was able to step up and have a couple of efficient nights, whereas, obviously even just like a week ago, we were like, oh, he's being really inconsistent lately. So just to get one good solid week against, relatively lowly competition, but to start off with the Lakers with 30 and then kind of follow that up in a losing effort to the Cavs, but to still kind of be able to utilize him a little bit more, even though Giannis isn't out there. I think that's a positive, and we'll just kind of have to see how that translates into the playoffs. But I'd say that in the Lakers game, and that's just the week in general, is one of my biggest takeaways.
Yeah, I think the Cavaliers, that 107-102 loss that the Bucks had over in Cleveland, as my friend's father calls it, the mistake on the lake.
Hey.
I had never heard that before, but I find it hilarious. Anyway, so the Bucks lose 107-102 in that game. I think those games sort of go part and parcel, as Riley was talking about, with Giannis missing both of them. Kyle, was there anything that stood out between those two games in this past week, between the Lakers and the Cavaliers game?
Well, I was going to say, Riley kind of touched on it, that Middleton, he had a really good week overall. I mean, and I'm sure we'll talk about the Heat game, but, especially in that Cleveland game, he started out, 4 of 6 from 3 within, I think, the first quarter. So things were looking really good. At least he was feeling it. And it was just, especially the Cleveland game, there's just not enough bodies. And even if they had a day of rest, I think Milwaukee would have won, but just on a back-to-back and only 8 players that were able to play, and some players were just not playing well at all. It's pretty much, it was not a loss that I had expected, but I think with one of Brogdon, Giannis, or Mirotic playing, I think that would have been different. But Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson taking 35 shots and hitting like 18 of them. I mean, you can live with them taking that many shots. It's just they actually made them, so that was kind of the tough part. Otherwise, yeah, it was mainly Milton that looked good this whole week. I mean, Brook had a couple moments, Ersan had a couple moments, Bledsoe not so much, but it's just kind of a weird week just because of how shorthanded they were, and it just seemed like it was injury after injury after injury within this week that it just made things. I mean, some Bucks fans panicked losing to Cleveland. I was not one of them. Let's just say you had 8 bodies that had just played the night before against a team that, their inefficient shooters were hitting shots. Like, shit happens. So
are you guys concerned at all that when Bud is up against the wall, he's not willing to be flexible and put Bonzi Colson in for his 30 minutes that everybody demands?
Yeah, that was the weirdest take I've ever seen this season, to say the least.
Oh, the idea of Bonzi Colson doing anything, dear God. I haven't watched any of his game. Yeah, that Cleveland game was a tough watch, I'll admit it. DJ Wilson finished at -24 for plus-minus, Connaughton -20, Frazier -7. Those were the 3 bench guys. So it tells you all you need to know, that you only could put in 3 bench guys. All the starters were positives, which was the interesting fact about that game. But also, I mean, at some point, I'm glad that Middleton sort of stepped up and looked efficient, scored well, definitely took some of the playmaking burden away from other guys. I thought one of the interesting things is that I feel like Bledsoe had a little bit of a tough week. In that Cleveland game, he still managed to fill up the box score, 24, 8, and 8. But it's interesting when Giannis is out, I would kind of expect Bledsoe to maybe feel like he wants to sort of take the reins here and lead a little bit more, but he kind of feels like he sort of flits in and out, irregardless of whether Giannis is there or not. Did you sort of feel that way, Riley, with Bledsoe's sort of odd week, both on and off shooting and decent stat lines, but other than that, I mean, it didn't feel like he was ever like someone who was in control of these games.
Yeah, I think it's weird because especially when Giannis is out, he obviously becomes even more so the primary ball handler and kind of creator of, or starter of offensive sets. And I'm not sure how much of it is he has difficulty kind of readjusting back to being, I mean, obviously he has Middleton as a co-star, but it's definitely not the same, just the way the system works when Giannis is out there versus when he's not. And that's even more so in a week where it's not even just like he's out of the lineup or just like out, getting rest for a couple of minutes. It's like the entire game. So I think we can probably attribute it to he's stuck almost in between gears, like you were saying, where he's able to still kind of fall back on the way he used to play and get you the stats that you're looking for, but it's not nearly as efficient or not nearly as effective as it usually is when you have, one of the league's best players kind of soaking up a lot of the attention. So I wouldn't say that I'm really concerned that it's, a mark of something that might linger for a couple of weeks here. I'm not going in like, oh, he's probably going to fall flat again in the playoffs. I think it's just a matter of trying to adjust for the fact, like in the Cavs game, there's not many other options besides him and Middleton to focus on. And then I think it's just tough because those two, him and Giannis, play a 2-man game so often. And even when Giannis was back in Miami or during the Miami game, Bledsoe only had 9 points. So even that wasn't all that great of a game. But I think in general, it's probably more so attributable, I can't pronounce words, to the fact that Giannis was out more than anything.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. The interesting thing about that Cleveland game was I honestly, it's weird. I didn't really even recognize it or feel like I this was happening during the time. But even though Wilson finished at minus 24, he's had a rough shooting week. He went 1 for 9 in that game. I think he was like 1 for 7 against the Lakers, but he also had 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals. Kyle, he's obviously been sort of a guy who people have rallied behind in the Bucks community, trying to get him off the bench. But I do have to say, I think it's really fascinating to see how these players have grown. Just like compare it to like how Rashad Vaughn actually seemed like he was a shadow on the court, like not really doing anything. But the fact that like DJ Wilson has sort of been able to flash some of this expanded game. I mean, even like lodging 5 assists in a game for a big man is, I would say, a pretty impressive feat for a guy who was just not really doing anything last year.
Yeah, and I think with Rashad Vaughn, it was simply if he couldn't hit shots, he couldn't be on the court. Even though he was kind of an average at best defender and had moments, it was a guard who was specifically there to be a shooter, and he couldn't hit his shots. While DJ Wilson, it's like, yeah, maybe he won't hit his shots, but he can still play good enough defense or grab enough rebounds, or like you said, have that playmaking side of him. So that's something that I'm kind of curious about. But yes, we got the hashtag free DJ, and then he had that Cleveland game, and well, it was, yeah. I mean, I still believe in DJ Wilson, but
it was like Summer League DJ all over again. Like I went back just to watch a couple of the highlights and like all of his shots. It was like the most DJ Wilson of 2 summers ago DJ Wilson game. Like he's not really like sort of not even initiating offense, but it was a lot of weird like step back jumpers, like mid rangers that don't make sense. And like, but still he would get a couple of rebounds and assists. Like it was a weird throwback game for DJ, but I guess that's what happens when you have to throw him out for like 30 minutes on a random Wednesday in Cleveland.
Yeah. Plus it was like, he seems to have gotten intimidated by like Tristan Thompson and Larry Nance and Kevin Love. It's like, what the heck? I don't understand how that happened, but it was just that Cleveland game. Yeah, he didn't play well. Bledsoe, yeah, he filled up the box score, but it was a very inefficient shooting night. It seemed like Middleton was the only one that came out of that game looking good. But again, it is what it is. 8 bodies on a back-to-back is not ideal, but I am curious to see, because it seemed like DJ Wilson did rebound a little bit better. Like he played a lot better in the Miami game, and even just before in the Philly game, he hit 3 or 4 threes, and 3 of them were in the corner. So it was just I think it was just an ebb and flow. That's what you're gonna get with a young player who didn't get much burn, and then he's kind of thrusted into the fire and has to, sink or swim at that moment. And in Cleveland, he sunk, while in Miami, he swam.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And the trepidation at the rim against some of those bigger guys has certainly borne out this year. I mean, he's only shooting. Doesn't have many attempts at all, but he's only has 47 attempts on this season. He's 25 out of 47 in terms of field goal percentage at the rim, just 53%. That's in the 7th percentile for bigs per cleaning the glass. So obviously, a lot of us know that that's not going to be his primary role, but you could certainly see some of those issues when he was trying to finish near the rim in these past couple of games. But irregardless of that, let's stop talking about the games without Giannis, because those are not
suck.
Because they suck. And let's talk about the 116-87 win over the Heat. Giannis had 27 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. Middleton chimed in with 18 points, 8 boards, 10 assists, nearing a triple-double there, of course. Offense looked a lot more in sync. It seemed to have a lot more flow to it. The Bucks had 33 assists in that game, 25 and 24 in the other 2 without Giannis. That's not too far off their regular typical assists per game count. It looks like they average around 26 per game. So those other 2 weren't atypical or anything. But this one, so the 33 might have been atypical, but it felt like there was a lot of flow to the offense, and it really just showed Riley how potent this Bucks team is when they actually are making shots at a proficient clip. They shoot 50% from the 3-point line. I mean, the fact that it feels like if the Bucks are shooting anywhere near that percentage from deep, they're almost unbeatable, right?
Yeah, I think Gabe wrote in his post game that if the Bucks shot over 50% from the floor, they had been 22-1 on the season. So obviously, just like the sheer wins bears that out. And again, I mean, we've talked about it time and time again, and it's sort of a trope, but this is just the way basketball ends up working out, especially when you have a system that's so centered around Giannis's sheer existence and the way that he plays, that he's back out there. He has a really awesome night from the floor. He keeps up his, monthly average of 1 ankle tweak a game that gets everybody's heart stopping. And then it kind of opens everything up. And lo and behold, when you have a lot more guys available and you have all the space generated by Giannis's just being out there, it goes a lot better and you're able to get better looks. And obviously there's a little bit of variance when it comes to whether or not shots actually go in from three. That's kind of another just aspect of having an offense, jump shooting offense, like we talked about, but having them out there means you get better shots. Better shots means usually they go in at a higher rate, you hope, and then you smack the Heat. So it's all good.
Yeah, Kyle. This is a potential first round matchup for the Bucks. The Heat and the Orlando John Hammonds are sort of vying for that 8 seed down there.
John Hammonds.
Shout out to that guy. Loves his tall men. And it feels like the Heat are we always say they're like a tough matchup for the Bucks, and I think that's certainly been true. Spo's a great coach. They have it's sort of an interesting fleet of players that are pretty switchable. They run this zone defense occasionally, but when you look at the results this year, the Bucks' one loss against them was 87-94. They just have a putrid shooting night from the floor. And then the other three it's in order a 113-98 win, a 124-86 win, and a 116-87 win. So I have to imagine that you're not too concerned about if we see the Heat in the first round.
Not even a little bit scared. Although, if you ask Skip Bayless, Miami is the team that the Bucks need to fear, which, of course, it's Skip Bayless, so I'm not going to take any seriousness with that tweet. But no, it was, the one game Milwaukee did lose in Miami, it was on a back-to-back. Like, they played in Boston at 8 o'clock Eastern time, and that game ended, and then they had to fly over, land at 4 a.m., and then try and turn on and play a game the next day. Like, you're not going to do well. But I think, last year, Miami would have been a tough team for Milwaukee to play against just because, Miami has a rim protector in Hassan Whiteside. They have James Johnson, who can kind of guard Giannis pretty well, and they're a lot more physical, which, last year when the Bucks offense was here, Giannis, Middleton, Bledsoe, do something, and I don't know. Well, now there's an actual offensive game plan. There's shooters on the court, and it spaces it out. And that's the big difference is you can take away the Whiteside factor just by having Brook Lopez take a three-pointer. And when you have shooters on the court, it kind of helps that it spreads it out a little bit more, and Giannis can beat anyone one-on-one. So I'm not really afraid of Miami. Granted, I think Orlando would be an easier matchup, but neither team really I could see winning more than a game. Like, I could see Miami winning a game 3 or game 4 just because, Miami nightlife might hit and Milwaukee might have a poor shooting night. But yeah, I think Miami is just a team that, they can give you fits, but they're not going to give you enough fits that it's going to be that tough of a series.
Yeah, you're kind of splitting hairs at that point, and hopefully, like you said, the guys don't do like a pre-celebratory "we won the first round" night in South Beach or something like that. But I agree that I don't know if you can say it's really a big takeaway since we played the Heat well pretty much all season long, including that like 65-point comeback, 2 weeks ago. But I think just in the context of this one specific game, like you said, Adam, or like you said, Kyle, just the fact that they got back on track offensively and the fact that you were able to get out of there with all the starters getting under 30 minutes of play, which is super duper awesome, especially with how much run some of the guys had to have earlier in the week. Plus, we should mention Ersan with the +26 with the suck it haters +26. So keep that in mind. For all those calling for free DJ, keep that number in mind, please.
Yeah, Ersan, honestly, since like partway through the season, he had that weird spell after he came back from the concussion where I don't know what was going on there, but he just wasn't able to make shots, and maybe his equilibrium is finally back, and so he's nailing shots, 4 of 6, 3 of 3 from deep. 13 points in that game, of course. Yeah, the Heat are such a weird, odd team. Like the fact that Justice Winslow, what was that, like 2 seasons ago, didn't they like started him at center or something in one game? They started him at like power forward, and now he's like their point guard this year. Yeah, I don't know.
They're kind of just trying to see if Justice Winslow can do anything on the court, which coming out of Duke, he was known as this guy that can play multiple positions. It could be a shutdown defender. But this might be taken a little bit too far. Expect him to be like a point guard.
Yeah, it's been they're an odd team, and certainly the difference between Orlando and Miami is fascinating. Spo certainly has a lot more playoff coaching experience. Orlando kind of seems like they would just be losing their mind to even get in the playoffs. I think I'm sure their owner would just be like counting all of the extra dollars that he gets from those playoff game tickets. So
all of the 10 people in the Amway Center on each game.
I will say Orlando being in playoff contention should be a win in itself for them, considering how bad they've been the past 10 years.
John Hammond, team fixer. That's what you call him. Bring him in and he'll turn you around for sure.
Yeah, 100%. That Obama pick looking good. All right, guys, let's move. Let's move on, because these games were fine, but they meant almost nothing to me. Let's touch on the Nikola Mirotic injury. So I think that's a lot more pertinent to this Bucks team and where we have them going this season. So of course he hurt his hand on basically drawing a foul on Mo Wagner. Yeah, Mo Wagner. I think that's right. You study you study European history, right, Riley? Is that how it would be pronounced?
So yes, the W in German is pronounced like a V, so it'd be Mo Wagner would be the pronunciation.
So cool. So Mo Wagner.
He why don't even come on this podcast?
Basically got his face in Nikola Mirotic's hand. Mirotic has a slight fracture of his left thumb. They expected him to be out 2 to 4 weeks, it looked like. But it sounded like, I think Bud said something like he expected him to be back in time for the playoffs. So really these last couple weeks, I'm not too concerned about it. These last couple weeks will just kind of be like getting some more run for guys like DJ Wilson, most importantly. And I guess I was curious, Kyle, who do you think his absence might benefit most out of anyone on this Bucks bench? Or even in the starting lineup, because obviously he was starting before this and Tony Snell moved into the starting lineup. So who do you think that his extended absence here towards the end of the season might benefit?
Surprisingly, Ersan Ilyasova.
Ooh, you beat me to the punch.
I honestly think, Ersan has played well in the past month after I ragged on him and said he should probably sit on the bench while DJ Wilson should get more minutes. I fully admit that he has turned it around, and good for him. And I think Ersan is going to have more of that veteran experience to help guide the bench unit. Plus, he's going to be able to take a couple charges, as infuriating as it is at times. But it looks like his shot's coming along. He's still getting those classic Ersan tip-in baskets. So I think his veteran experience plus his improved play will give him more of a run with Mirotic out, because it's going to kind of be like before the trade where he's one of the first guys off the bench, and he's going to be, playing with that, Giannis Ersan lineup or Ersan Brook lineup. So I think he's going to be the one that really benefits from this. I think DJ will also benefit just because he'll get more minutes and he'll kind of get a chance for an extended run. But I think Ersan's the biggest benefactor. And second place would maybe be Tony Snell, just so he can get slotted into the starting lineup.
Fewer lineups where Ersan and Mirotic are out there together and just getting burned time after time is probably for the best for Ersan. No, I would agree that Ersan is probably a candidate. I oddly enough picked Mike Budenholzer as the biggest winner, which is kind of counterintuitive, but the way that I kind of looked at it was, yes, like he's going to be forced to get a little bit more creative with his lineups, but I think it might be helpful for him to kind of go through a trial period to get an idea of, as we have, I think there's only like 9 games left, like who is it on the bench that I actually rely upon, or who is most effective, or kind of get an idea now that all the pieces are here. Yes, you're missing Mirotic, but in general, like what do these guys look like? And I kind of went back. I went back to the 2014, 2015 season just to look at how Budenholzer constructed his lineups in the playoffs. And he ran here, let me pull it all up here. So he ran 8 guys out there for 14 of the 16 games. He had 11 guys who were averaging 10 or more minutes per game, which is pretty long, but I think 3 of those guys were like just right around 10 minutes. So they were mostly either garbage time or just real spot minutes. And then most importantly, he ended up running his starters out there on average across the 5 of them, 34.72 minutes per game. So I think what this will be interesting is not so much the starters, just because that's relatively straightforward, but he can get an idea, is Tony Snell a guy that if we're going to have to be without Malcolm for the first round and part of the second, can I rely upon him? Or somebody else off the bench, somebody that can fill in and be effective in those kind of in between the 10 and 15 minute mark that I'm looking for. So I think of anybody, this is probably just like good medicine for Budenholzer, just to get a better idea as we get to final stretch here. Who is it that I'm going to be using?
I think that's a really smart point to make, especially and when you talk about going back and looking at him only running 8 guys out in the playoffs. I feel like the playoffs will be will take a bit of an adjustment period for a lot of Bucks fans. I mean, if you look at this team, it's hard to imagine only 8 guys playing. I mean, I'm just like, obviously the 5 starters, we're going to go sans Brogdon, but I mean, just on your bench, I mean, you have George Hill, Pat Connaughton, Ersan Ilyasova, Tony Snell, DJ Wilson, Sterling Brown. Right off the bat, I mean, that's 6 guys who you would expect to probably get regular minutes, but if he's only running about an 8-man rotation, half of those guys won't even play. So I think I think you're making a really smart point in pointing out the fact that this will give Bud a chance to decide who he really thinks can hold their water in the playoffs. And I guess it's a little disheartening the fact that Mirotic he seemed to be hitting his stride, at least in that Lakers game, had a little more chance to shine and score some additional points there. And it seems like his fit would have been so natural into this team. And, he's just kind of like basically fulfilling that Ersan Ilyasova role, but to a much larger degree. But it's too bad that he won't get a chance here to get regular rotation minutes, even down the stretch, and feel like even more acclimated into this Bucks rotation, right, Kyle?
Sorry,
Kyle agrees.
Yeah, sorry, my computer decided to freeze and I couldn't hear anything. What did he say?
Yes. I was just saying that Nikola Mirotic. It's too bad that he's that he's out, because I mean, he got so few games to even like get acclimated to this Bucks team, and it felt like he probably still needed a little more time, at least to definitely get used to some of the defensive strategies and with this read and react offensive system. I mean, even Giannis, like after an off season, basically was having a little bit of trouble finding his spots to start the season. So it's too bad that he's not getting this additional chance here to get a little more run with these guys on the court in the lead up to the playoffs.
Yeah, and it'll be tough just because, maybe it might be a good thing because he was kind of in a mini slump before the injuries. So maybe I'll give him a chance to clear his head. Him sitting on the bench and watching kind of the rotations, everything might give him a good idea. I'm sure he's going to sit there and sit with the players and coaches, and they'll point stuff out to him or they'll realize it. And I think it's a bummer, as you said, just not to get that run before the playoffs, but at the same time, it could help him understand the defense more, watching it from the side instead of being, right in the middle of it, and also giving him a chance to get his way out of the shooting slump. So,
yeah, and I think part of it too, just because it's a hand injury, like he'll be able, I don't even know how much teams practice, not that much at this point, but if they do any sort of like little scrimmages or even shoot around, he can still take part, obviously, without having to worry, as long as they're not like whipping the ball over to him. But I mean, obviously it's not ideal. Like you said, it would be great if he could actually be out there, but luckily it's not like an ankle injury where he can't even like participate in moving around within sets to kind of get an idea of where teammates go and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. You guys have any thoughts at all on the Gasol injuries that just came across the wire yesterday, that Gasol has a left ankle injury? He's going to expected to miss at least 1 month here. So he'll probably be out for maybe that first round of the playoffs. And who knows if he would even have gotten minutes regardless, but it seems like
devastated. I'm broken. I'm just gonna curl up in a ball, like cry a little bit, and just crying shame.
I think I saw somewhere, and there was no verification on this, so take this with the largest grain of salt of all time, because it could have been.
I saw somewhere. I was randomly.
Yeah, well, it was on Twitter, which is obviously a super reliable news source. But I thought I saw an account with like DJ Wilson fan 12345 tweeted something about Pau Gasol being upset that he wasn't getting nearly as much run. Which, if there's any truth to that, DJ Wilson fan 12345, I don't know what Pau Gasol was expecting signing up with the team. I don't know what promises the team made, but I will not mourn his loss. Hopefully he's okay suiting up and being a pseudo coach, aka Jet, and hopefully we don't have to rely on him for like 30 minutes in a Game 7 situation. So.
Nah, Jet's dead to me. No, don't mention it.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, he went Harden over Giannis for MVP. How dare he?
Yep.
We don't have to talk about Jet.
No, that mentions for the year. That's it.
Riley, the fact that you attributed that to DJ Wilson fan 12345, unbiased source there, so straight from straight
Yeah,
from.
I think they said the location they were tweeting from was Vladivostok, Russia, which was a little strange to me, but whatever. Like I'll take the info wherever I can get it.
Wow, that is a hot scoop. Well, we're gonna head out for a break after that, for an ad break here, and then we'll be back on the other side. We'll talk a little bit about how the Bucks maybe should approach Giannis's lingering ankle injury here towards the end of the season. An update on how destroyed my collar is after Giannis got hurt, in terms of my bet and my life and financial security, and then look ahead to the week ahead. So we'll be back right after this. All right, we're back. And Kyle, I think you brought up an interesting point that I think is top of mind for Bucks fans, especially with this ankle injury that obviously helped him miss 2 games last week and then reared its ugly head again in that Miami game. He, of course, finished it out because his ankles are made of adamantium. How do you think that they should try and approach this towards the end of the season, knowing that, of course, the getting the first seed should be important, but obviously the more important thing is having Giannis be healthy and ready to go come playoff time?
Okay, first of all, well done on the pronunciation of that, because I would have butchered it at least 5 times. So let's just get that thrown out there. But in terms of the first seed, I think Milwaukee still will want the first seed, and I think Giannis will also want to try and help his team get that 1 seed and clinch home court advantage throughout the whole playoffs, not even just in the Eastern Conference. Right now, I think the Bucks' magic number is 6 going into Sunday's game, and if they win and Toronto loses, then it goes down to 4. So if they can clinch that home court by, game 76, 77, that'd be ideal. You can rest Giannis for the rest of the season. Also, I don't know if he gets his ankles taped, but as someone that has broken his ankle once and sprained his ankle multiple times, you got to tape the damn ankles, okay? Like, I don't know what's going on with the training staff. Like, tape it as much as you can. Wear an ankle brace. I don't care what just do that, because I cannot handle another Giannis on the ground holding his ankle in pain, even if, he gets over it relatively quickly. My heart cannot handle it anymore. So, yeah, please tape it, put it in a cast. I don't care. Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Suki Hobson, we know you're listening. Put a cast on there, get him out there. Let's go.
And I don't know if they tape it before the game, but at least tape it now for the remainder of the season. But now that I got sidetracked. Also, the Bucks, I wouldn't be surprised if he plays less minutes. It seems like the slate of games are going to get a little bit easier. I know this week is not so much, but if he can, go down to that 28 minute per game range, I think that'd be good. Just, we saw it in Miami. Like, once it got to the second half, Milwaukee's been able to pull away, which has been the trend all season. Is Milwaukee's second half kind of goes into a Golden State-esque performance, and then next thing you know, they're up 15 or 20, and that's when you can probably let Giannis play less, give Ersan and GJ Wilson a little bit more run. So that's how I would approach the Giannis injury. I still think the first seed is going to be too important for him not to play, or at least play in meaningful minutes.
Yeah, and of course, this is now the second week in a row where we are relying upon our own history with these injuries to certainly help the Bucs staff and let people know specific diagnoses. Riley gave us that really important update on plantar fasciitis last week. So, of course, rely on us, Bucs staff, and Suki Hobson. Of course, you can tweet at Kyle Koche if you need any advice on how to deal with the ankles.
Not a doctor. Not a doctor.
But he does have a Twitter account.
But does have a Twitter account. All right, Riley, you pulled out some interesting stats though regarding the Bucs maybe trying to get this first seed and the importance of locking that one up. You want to run through some of those?
Yeah. So, shocker, everybody, stop the presses. Just so you know, having home court advantage is really important in the playoffs.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, who would ever have guessed? So I started my research by Googling around and looking for other people who actually did the work to find the research and actually find the numbers. So
Riley's outsourcing all of his information this week.
Yeah. This is a little behind. Was it inside baseball? Is that the phrase? That's what's going on with the podcast right now. So this is some inside podcasting. So I kind of started over at 538, and I can't remember who the author was. So maybe I'll attribute that in a second once I pull up the article. But essentially, they had run a test for every game since the year 2000 and kind of seen like what kind of boost the home team generally gets in terms of their winning percentage. And they found that during the regular season, they got a boost of about 9.8% if you assume you're going to win about 50% of the games. And then in the playoffs, that shoots up to plus 14%. So obviously there's that just raw number that kind of proves out what we all assume. And then looking at the way the Bucks have performed at home versus on the road, obviously everybody knows they're awesome at home. They have an 82.8 winning percentage at home. It's only 65.8 on the road, so that's about a 17% boost at home. Which even if you're still winning over 50% of your games on the road, you're still good. So there's that. But then I looked at Toronto at that same kind of number there, and since they're the only team that's really within striking distance, I believe I ended up determining that the difference between their home and away was about 17.5%. So it's a slight increase for them, but when you're looking at potentially needing every single card up your sleeve when you have maybe an injured rotation or a rotation you're still kind of putting together in the playoffs, you need every single little advantage you can. And obviously having home courts, not only throughout the East playoffs, but then into the finals as well, if you're able to make it that far. I think keeping that all in mind, the way that you have to kind of use Giannis is don't change it up all that much between now and when you actually sync it up and actually have the 1 seed in hand, because even though there's a 3-game difference, and yes, it's pretty close to insurmountable, the Bucks still have, I think, the 16th hardest remaining record, and the Raptors have the easiest record left in the NBA. So even though they'll be playing a couple teams that still have something to play for in terms of playoff seeding, they have an easier path heading forward, where the Bucks have a little bit harder one. So in my opinion, I think you just keep on riding Giannis as best you can. And once you get to that, like Kyle said, then you can kind of give him a rest off if he so desires.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, the fact that he's constantly able to do this in games and then repeatedly come back no matter what, even though he seems to be lying on the ground in intense pain and then proceeds to score like 15 straight points and drive to the basket is incredible to me. But obviously Giannis's health should be of utmost importance, and I think they've done an incredible job this year of limiting his minutes compared to last year. I think they're really in fantastic shape in terms of rest and recuperation just going into the playoffs, and it's just an incredibly stark difference compared to years past where these guys, where Chris Middleton would like lead the league almost in minutes played per game, and Giannis would be right there alongside him. I mean, how nuts is that like Chris Middleton was like the leading one of the guys who was leading the league in terms of minutes played, and this year, Bud's doing a significantly better job of helping rest his minutes, and it helps that the Bucks are blowing teams out. Really,
go
ahead.
I was going to say, I saw the stat where even if Giannis and Middleton were to play 48 minutes for the remainder of the season, I think this was at like right around the All-Star break or a couple weeks after, even if they had played 48 minutes per game, they'd still be lower than what they had last year, which is shocking.
That's just absolutely crazy. And as Riley outlined, I mean, there's myriad benefits of just getting that 1 seed. Obviously, the primary advantage being that you have a stronger chance of hopefully winning with home court advantage. You have it in decisive game 7s. It looks like barring a complete collapse, hopefully the Bucks will be able to secure that down the stretch here. As of this recording, they have a 3-game lead on Toronto. And I know the Warriors just lost. I mean, should they be fortunate enough to even get to the finals? And if the Warriors are there as well, the Warriors just lost to Dallas as well. Destruction, 126-91. So Bucks are in good position to be able to have the best record in the NBA and secure home court throughout. And not only would they get that home court advantage for hopefully benefits on the court, but I mean, plenty of benefits for Milwaukee as well. Just the fact that they'd be able to bring in hopefully more, hopefully if there's, longer a series goes, there'd be more sales at the gate, more people getting their eyes on Milwaukee. I just think it would be a really cool thing if they're able to have that advantage, because I don't know the last time that they would have had home court advantage throughout the playoffs. Would it have been like 01?
Yeah, I believe so. Sounds about right. So it's been almost 2 decades.
Yeah.
No big deal.
It's about time.
Yeah, that's so.
It's been, a couple decades. It's
been a minute. If there's any proper way to use the phrase "it's been a minute," it's been a minute.
Yeah. All right. Do you guys have anything else from this past week that you wanted to touch on before we just briefly look ahead to the week coming up?
I was going to say, because we were just talking, I didn't get too deep into it. So just kind of looking at how they should utilize Giannis. I think it's interesting over the last 11 games, he's only averaged 31.1 minutes a game, which is still below his season average of 32.9. And kind of looking at that and thinking about what's the strategy, I still advocate for having him play a bit, but maybe you try to dial back the number of possessions that go through his hands a little bit. So over that same 11 game stretch, he averaged about a 34.2% usage rate. And there were 4 losses in there. 2 of them came when he had 39 plus usage rate against Philly and Utah. Both of them kind of strange or unique games in their own way. And they also lost 2 against San Antonio and Phoenix when he dropped below 27.2% usage rate. So I think there's a sweet spot in there, and you can kind of trend maybe closer towards the 27 or like low 30s and still maybe, like we talked about this past week, Chris kind of get going a little bit and maybe get a couple other guys, especially if it's a rotation in fluidity right now because of the injuries. And also just given Giannis's physical play style and how often he goes inside. And obviously, as we talked about with his ankle tweaks. So I think in general, if you can keep him out there, it's probably going to be similar-ish minutes, but maybe just lighten up just a tiny bit if you can. But if not, probably not the end of the world.
Yeah, and of course, those games where he's up around 39% usage, that's basically what James Harden has been averaging all season long. So that tells you all you need to know about how much offensive creation was in his hands in those games. So, Kyle, anything else from this past week that you want to touch on, or should we look ahead?
I think it was just, like I said, with the injuries and kind of the situation for each of those games, it was kind of interesting where, going into the Laker game, you weren't sure if you were going to have LeBron or Giannis, and then you ended up having neither. And the Bucks were relatively fine in that game, other than KCP going off. And then you had the Cleveland game, which, that was also a shorthanded game. Middleton still playing well. Another odd game where, 9 out of 10 times Milwaukee wins. And then you kind of turn around and face Miami, a team that supposedly gives them fits, and they kind of just control the game from start to finish. So the situation of this week kind of made it seem like things were worse than they actually were. And going into, I think, the next 2 weeks, it's going to be a lot of scoreboard watching between seeing how the Raptors do, seeing how Golden State does or Denver, while also having a couple tough games with some cakewalks at the same time. So it's going to be, I think this week was just an odd week that we shouldn't read too much into, but who knows? People, obviously, we overreact a little bit too much at times.
Speaking of overreactions, I forgot to say DJ Wilson had an individual net rating of plus 61.2 against the Miami Heat on Friday. So keep that in mind, everybody.
So what you're saying is most improved player MVP.
Correct, yes, and MVP, correct. So so while Ersan is out there with plus 26, just know that DJ sees that and raises him with a plus 60 or plus 61.2 net rating.
Yeah, DJ's the guy. Yeah, DJ always uses the advanced stats. He doesn't care about some of those basic.
He's not counting stats, bro.
Yeah. He's sort of he's like a Renaissance man. He gets that stuff. All right, let's move on and let's take a look at the week ahead. I'll do a quick update on how I'm feeling about my bet that I made. Obviously, I announced last week that I put some financial backing behind thinking the Bucks might win the championship. After I did that, the Bucks proceeded to have Malcolm Brogdon, Pau Gasol, and Nikola Mirotic all get injured. So
I'm not
feeling really
good,
guys.
But...
Yeah. So I feel bad for Bucks Nation. I think I caused them, so I'm sorry about that. But at least for now, I still feel okay about the bet. And then the other thing we should definitely plug is this Bucks Twitter bracket between Bucks personalities that's going on, organized by @JuneFoshiz. Who works over at Cream City Central, of course, on Twitter. That's been a really fun thing to just see different factions of Bucks Twitter that maybe I wasn't familiar with and maybe other people weren't familiar with. And it's a really fun thing to just kind of organize. And Kyle, I think you're facing Frank Madden in the latest matchup, right?
Yeah, congrats to Frank on his round 2 domination. I'm just pulling a Cinderella, Wofford. I'm just happy to have gotten past the first round feeling. So I'm just I knew once I saw the bracket, I was like, I have a tough first round matchup with former Brew Hooper Brett, and then to turn around and have to play Frank in round 2. Well, that's my ceiling. That's as far as I was going to get.
It's the biggest David versus Goliath since David versus Goliath. We're watching history happen right now.
And I'm probably getting crushed like 83% to like 10 or something.
Yeah, what would you be happy with in terms of percentage, Kyle, that you would say, yes, I take the L, but I'm happy with the number I got?
10%. If I get above
Okay.
10%, I'm calling out a victory for myself.
You heard it here first, folks. We got to make it happen.
Riley, who are you facing? I don't even know.
I'm facing co-overlord of Brew Hoop, Mitchell Maurer, in the second round.
Oh, I should definitely know that.
Yeah, so no big deal. If
screw over Brew Hoop, my column.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'll just make that my Monday morning column, just the case for me. Now, I would say I would be happy with a win, but I also would not be upset because Mitchell is one half of a team that allows me to put out content. So if he wins, I'm more than happy for you, Mitchell.
Well, I think it's a win-win situation. It's going to be Brew Hoop irregardless, and that is always a great thing for me and for us and for the site. So I'm rooting on all of my Brew Hoop brethren that are able to advance in that thing. And obviously, Frank Madden, no offense, Kyle, but if he wins it all, I'll feel fantastic
I'm expecting Frank to win the whole thing. Although I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Velasquez were to quietly just win the whole thing either.
Guys, I'm right here in the podcast now.
That's actually a good way to face him.
I'm still here, guys. You don't have to. We can talk about my championship, aspirations next week, maybe.
Is your grandma anything like that grandma that was cheering on Loyola last year? That old woman? Do you have anyone like that you could maybe bring out? That might be
no, I don't think so.
No, okay, all right.
I don't have that Sister Jean in my corner.
All right. Okay. Well, let's move on then. Let's just take a quick look at the week ahead. We're recording this before the Cavaliers game. I made an executive decision thinking that game probably wouldn't matter. Excited for that to be wrong. On Tuesday, the Bucks face off against Houston. MVP matchup: James Harden, Giannis Antetokounmpo. On Thursday, they face the LA Clippers, and then next Sunday they face the Atlanta Hawks. So usually we just do a quick record, but let's take a quick breakdown of this Houston game because I actually think it's going to be pretty interesting. My boss is a huge Houston Rockets fan. Last time I came in when they faced off, he decorated my desk with a bunch of Rockets memorabilia. So I'm pretty hyped up for that game, hoping that Giannis might be able to. Riley, it's silly, but I think this is going to be. It's going to be annoying how large this probably looms in terms of the MVP debate and narrative that's going to be coming up here.
Well, first, before we get into that, so is your your boss, the Rockets fan, like our version of Locked On Bucks is Frank Madden's wife, who is a Rockets fan? Is that our equivalent here?
I guess that's what we have. Yeah, we have
the discount version.
Yes, yeah, definitely discount version. He's a great guy, but certainly I'm not as close as Frank is with his wife. Dear God, might have to edit this out.
Okay. Well, with that being said, no, I would agree that it's going to be super annoying, like the level of importance put on this Rockets game. And I mean, obviously it is important just for God, I can hear, what do we call Ryan Hollins? Is he Ryan Collins? Is that his nickname around here?
Wait, I don't know.
Yeah,
I forget what his real name is.
So I could see him and his ilk going in if the Bucks don't win, being like, this is why. And, he who shall not be named, who played for the team last year with a headband. I think a lot of them will come out of this if the Bucks don't win or if Giannis doesn't have a great performance, being like, see, I told you, James Harden, this is why you've got to vote him MVP. The way that I look at it, because I mean, the Rockets are rolling right now. I think they've won 9 of their last 10, and they've been working a lot of teams. And obviously Harden has kind of dialed back the offensive load since Paul returned, but they're definitely a dangerous team. The way that I see that one going is kind of almost similar to the Philly game where the way I think the game that they played in Houston was like end of January, and this team looks quite a bit different, just the different pieces and now guys who are unavailable. Because I think Brogdon had a big game in that one as well. So what I anticipate is Giannis going crazy and probably having like close to another 50-point game, but I'm not sure if the Bucks will fall short just because they're missing, too many contributors that would be important in a game like this.
Yeah, Kyle, who do you think is the biggest candidate for Giannis to call a baby on the Rockets?
I still think it's going to be James Harden. Although Giannis did drill a ball into his face last time.
I forgot about that.
Maybe he won't say to James Harden again just because he'll just try and replicate that. But otherwise, I think the funny thing is if James Harden still scores 40 or 50, people are going to say, well, he's the MVP. Like if Harden scores, say, 45 points, on 30 shots, but Giannis has like a quiet like 21 point, 13 rebound, but the Bucks win. People are still going to say James Harden just because he's putting up the stats, and I'm just whatever about it, but I think that's going to be the interesting matchup just because I don't know if that's a nationally televised game. I'd be shocked if it wasn't.
Yeah, it's on TNT, I think.
Oh, crap. Okay, well, that's not going to make things better, but yeah, I can still see, Harden getting his points, getting his stats, and losing while people champion him as the MVP. Well, Giannis could score, a typical Giannis game and get the win. Or if the Rockets win, it's a lose-lose for Giannis because unless he outscores Harden and wins, I don't see any scenario in which the talking heads in the national media are going to say he's the MVP. But it is what it is. I'm not as concerned about that game. I'm more curious about that LA Clippers one, just because the Clippers, they beat Milwaukee the last time. They're the team. Those are the kind of games where you have to win. Not beating Houston, okay, that's understandable. Not beating the Clippers is a little bit more of an issue, and then the Hawks follow that. Like, if you lose either of those games, that's, I think, a bigger concern to me than this Rockets game because Chris Paul is back. He wasn't in the first game while the Bucks don't have Brogdon and Mirotic, so.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, that narrative that you laid out where James Harden really runs up his box score, but the Rockets still lose is essentially what happened in the last game. James Harden went off for 42 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists, 9 turnovers in that game, which is nuts for him.
Shout out Eric Bledsoe's defense.
116 to 109. Yeah, 116 to 109. The Bucks win that one. Giannis had 27 points, 21 rebounds. Holy yikes! 5 assists in that one. And like you were saying, Riley, I mean, the absence of Malcolm Brogdon will certainly be felt. Just 24, he had 24 points in that game, finished a plus 20, so he was obviously a huge presence. Brook Lopez only had 7, but more importantly, like, he held Clint Capella to just 4 of 16 shooting from the floor, which was really impressive. He had a lot. Clint Capella had a lot of trouble finishing that night, I remember. So that'll probably be the marquee game of the week. Let's go on to predictions then. We're not going to pick the Cavs game, obviously, because it's already done by the time you hear this. So for those 3 games, Houston, Clippers, and the Hawks, where do you have them? How do you have them finishing, Riley?
I went 2-1. I think they're gonna lose to the Rockets, but I think they'll grab up W's against the Clippers in Atlanta. Atlanta, because they're in a weird spot, but they're sort of tanking, but not really. But they're not that great of a team. And then the Clippers, they've also won 9 of their last 10, but a lot of those teams were not great teams. Like, a lot of them are like bad Eastern teams or like bubble teams. So I think they'll be able to secure the W. And I think they played them close when they went out west, but that was part of a long West Coast road trip. So I think being at home, they'll be able to do it.
Kyle, what do you got?
I'm so torn. I want to say 3-0. I'm sticking with 3-0. I have
one of these
to.
weeks I'm waiting for you to go like, all right, I'm going to go 1-2.
It's probably going to take knowing Giannis won't play the games to change my mind on that. And even then, I still might say 500, but I just think Milwaukee having home court is going to benefit them for the Houston game. I think LA, it took a lot of odd stuff for them to win, including a last second shot from Lou Williams. And then Atlanta's playing better, but I think Bledsoe can still match up with Trae Young pretty well. I think that's going to be the key thing is Eric Bledsoe playing better this week than he did last week, and also shooting better. So I got to stay on brand. I got to stay with the hype train. 3-0.
Hype train is rolling for Kyle. I'm going to go 2-1. I think they're going to beat the Rockets, beat the Clippers, but I think they're going to drop that game in Atlanta. Maybe Giannis
It might
will
be a
sit,
rest game. Yeah.
It's a weird 11:30 start on a Sunday. I don't know. That's always a really, really odd time. You just never know what to expect when a game starts that early. These guys' bodies are so conditioned to play at night. So I'm going to go 2-1. All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week of the podcast. Obviously, just the absolutely incredible slate of games we had to break down. So we're glad you guys stuck around with us. Make sure to rate and review the podcast if you like it. 5 stars, por favor, or whatever you think is fair. And make sure to go to brewhoop.com. We'll have stuff there all week. Follow the @BrewHoop account. Rate and vote for our Brew Hoopers in the Bucks Twitter bracket. And stay tuned, and we'll be back in your ears again next week. Thanks again for listening.